This woodpecker is hammering away at the tree with its head, hitting it thousands of times per day. Yet it doesn't seem to feel any pain or get a headache. But how is that possible? And more importantly, why don't we humans have such strong skulls? You see, although our skulls may look very hard, they are actually quite brittle, just like glass. So if we were to hammer our heads against a tree as hard as this woodpecker hammers its head, our skull would likely crack, causing a severe concussion. But not only that, over millions of years of evolution, woodpeckers have developed a whole host of special adaptations to protect themselves from the force of their hammering, which has allowed them to evolve the ability to literally hammer their heads thousands of times a day. Now, even though our skulls may be brittle like glass, there are certain animals that can break our skulls with ease, such as this baboon, and this is because the strength of an object isn't always determined by its material composition. The shape of an object also plays a big role. For example, when baboons smash open coconuts, they use the flat side of their skull to do so, which allows them to exert a crushing force that can break through the coconut's woody shell. In contrast, if they were to tap the coconut with the top of their head, the coconut wouldn't break, even if they were doing it thousands of times a day. This is because the top of their skull is curved, which spreads out the force of their impact, preventing them from exerting enough force to break the coconut. Now, in the case of woodpeckers, they have evolved to take advantage of this same concept. Although woodpeckers have relatively small and thin skulls compared to other birds, they are able to hammer their heads against trees thousands of times a day, thanks to the shape of their skull. You see, their skull has a large convex surface area where the beak meets the skull, which means that the force of their pecks is spread out over a larger surface area, which reduces the amount of force being exerted on any one part of their skull. If their skull was flatter, they would be able to peck much less frequently before damaging their skull. But that's not the only reason why woodpeckers are able to peck so fast. Another adaptation that helps to protect their skulls is the presence of air sacs. Air sacs are basically hollow, gas-filled structures that are found in birds that allow for unidirectional airflow through the lungs, which increases the efficiency of oxygen uptake. These air sacs are also connected to the sinuses in the bird's skull, which helps to reduce the density of the skull. For example, in this cross-section of a red-bellied woodpecker's skull, you can see the air sacs that run through the sinuses of the skull. By reducing the density of their skulls, woodpeckers are able to reduce the force of their pecks on the tree, which further reduces the stress on their skull. In addition to these two adaptations, woodpeckers also have other adaptations that help them to peck so hard and so often. For example, they have stiffening elements within their neck vertebrae that prevent their necks from bending while they are pecking. They also have powerful neck muscles that allow them to store elastic energy while they are pecking, which then gets released during the next peck, giving them more power and speed. Plus, their feathers also play a role in reducing the force of their pecks on their bodies. Basically, their feathers provide a cushion that helps to absorb some of the impact force of their pecks, protecting their bodies from the force of their pecks. And lastly, although it might seem obvious, woodpeckers also have tough skulls. Just take a look at this X-ray of a woodpecker's skull. It looks like it's made of steel. And this is due to the fact that woodpeckers have a higher proportion of compact bone tissue in their skulls, which makes their skulls stronger than the average bird skull. And even though this isn't really visible in the X-ray, woodpeckers also have spongy bone tissue inside of their skulls that helps to distribute the force of impacts throughout the entire skull, reducing the amount of force being exerted on any one part of their skull. So all of these adaptations combined allow woodpeckers to peck as hard and as fast as they do. But what about the sound that woodpeckers make when they are pecking? You see, when a woodpecker hits a tree, it doesn't just make a thud noise, but instead it makes a distinct pecking sound. And this sound is actually caused by the shock wave created by the peck compressing the air in the woodpecker's partially closed mouth. But what keeps the shock wave from damaging the woodpecker's mouth and throat? Well, it turns out that the muscles in a woodpecker's throat help to close off their windpipe during pecking, which prevents the shock wave from entering the bird's body and damaging its mouth or throat. And then once the woodpecker pulls its head back, the muscles relax, allowing air to flow back into the windpipe. But what about us humans? Why don't we have these adaptations to help us withstand impacts to our heads? Well, it turns out that we actually do have some of these adaptations, but we've just evolved to use them in different ways. For example, we also have air sacs connected to our sinuses, but we use them for producing sound rather than reducing the density of our skulls. In addition, we also have stiffening elements within our neck vertebrae, but we use them for supporting our heads rather than for preventing our necks from bending while we are pecking. And lastly, our skulls are also thicker than the average animal skull, but we don't use them for protection, but instead we use them as a framework for our facial muscles and other structures. Basically, we've just evolved to use these structures in different ways than other animals have. So although we may not be able to peck as hard as woodpeckers, we do have these structures for other reasons. But speaking of our skulls, although we may not be able to peck as hard as woodpeckers, we do have some pretty strong skulls, which brings up the question, how strong is a human skull? And the answer is that there is a wide range of human skull strength depending on a variety of factors such as age, sex, and overall health. On average, however, a human skull can withstand an impact force of between 4,000 and 6,000 newtons, which is roughly equivalent to the force of a car crash. This is actually quite impressive considering the fact that our skulls are made of relatively lightweight and brittle material. But what about extreme cases? What is the strongest human skull ever recorded? Well, in 2013, a man named Jason Paget from England was hit in the head by a baseball bat multiple times, sustaining only minor injuries. After undergoing a CT scan and MRI, it was found that his skull had absorbed all of the impact force without fracturing, indicating that his skull was much stronger than average. But what makes this case even more remarkable is that Jason had previously undergone surgery to remove a brain tumor, which required the removal of a significant portion of his skull. And instead of using titanium or some other metal to replace the missing portion of his skull, doctors had used a piece of his own rib to reconstruct his skull. This case demonstrates the incredible strength of even an unreinforced human skull. But what about the weakest human skull ever recorded? Well, unfortunately, there are many cases of infants and young children sustaining skull fractures from relatively low impact forces. One of the most well-known cases is that of 18-month-old Kyle Troutman from California, who died after being hit in the head by a softball-sized ball that was being thrown by his father. In this case, the force of the impact was estimated to be only 150 newtons, which is roughly equivalent to the force of a person dropping a bowling ball on someone's head. This tragic case demonstrates the fragility of young children's skulls and the importance of taking precautions to protect them. But speaking of young children, you might be wondering, how does the skull strength of a baby compare to that of an adult? And the answer is that baby skulls are significantly weaker than adult skulls. This is because babies are born with soft spots in their skulls, which allow for brain growth and development. These soft spots remain until the baby is around 6 months old. During this time, a baby's skull can withstand only about half the force that an adult skull can withstand. However, as the baby gets older and their skull hardens, their skull strength increases to match that of an adult skull. But some of you might be wondering, what about those protective helmets that construction workers wear? How much force can they withstand? Well, it turns out that there is a wide range of helmet designs and materials, each offering different levels of protection. However, most construction helmets are designed to withstand an impact force of around 3,000 newtons. This is significantly higher than the average human skull's force capacity, but it's still lower than the upper range of human skull strength. So although these helmets are designed to protect construction workers from serious injury, they aren't necessarily capable of withstanding the full force of an average human skull. But what about those sports helmets such as American football helmets? These helmets are designed to withstand much higher impact forces than construction helmets. According to the National Operating Committee on Standards for Athletic Equipment, football helmets should be able to withstand an impact force of at least 7,500 newtons. That's twice the amount that construction helmets can withstand. This is because football players experience much higher impact forces than construction workers due to the nature of the sport. However, it's important to note that even with these stronger helmets, concussions are still possible and can cause serious injury. But now, it's time to make your voice heard. Comment below. Which adaptation of the woodpecker's skull do you think is the most impressive and why? Comment down below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. See ya.